Hello, and in this video I'm going to be talking about Orcs Must Die, the board game, and I'm actually going to talk about both versions of the game, but I'm going to start off with the Order Edition. Now this is a Petersen Games production. It was available on Kickstarter, it's now in the stores, and I haven't seen too much talk about it, which is a bit of a shame because it's based on the wonderful kind of mob attack computer game. And if you actually are lucky enough to own both copies, the front cover is a rather epic vista. So let me just get that set up for you, and then I'll start showing you the contents of the Order Edition. And there it is in all its glorious wonder. So the Order Edition, you're playing as the goodies, trying to fend off the orcs. In the Unchained Edition, you are playing as the orcs, trying to fend off the heroes. And if you've got both sets and enough players, you can actually have a battle where the orcs are defending their rift and attacking the Order's rift, and vice versa. The Order are trying to defend their rift whilst at the same time attacking the Unchained rift. So really cool. I'm not going to go into that particular feature of the game. I'm going to focus primarily on the Order Edition, and I might give you just a quick peek at some of the Unchained extras. Okay, well I've got the box open. I will point out that I've got a couple of Kickstarter extras and also a couple of expansions chucked into the box. Where I remember, I will try and point them out. The first thing you're going to possibly notice here is the maps, and there are random maps that just show you one. So here you go, the Rotator. So they start here, and they're trying to get to the rift down here, and various weird and wonderful things potentially go on, and it's a difficulty of 3.4 apparently. So there you go. So that's the map. There's several maps inside, and of course you've got a version of the cover there. Then you've got a rulebook, which isn't the best thing to reference whilst you're playing, but the lovely summary sheet on the back of the rulebook pretty much gives you everything you need to play. I will just point out there are a couple of typos, which hopefully they'll get fixed if they ever bring out a second edition. Where is it? Upgrade Rift Display. I believe this is renamed as Revitalize inside the book. So Upgrade Rift Display, aka Revitalize. So there you go. Then you have various adventure sheets. Now some of these are actually from the Hero expansion. So I believe the Adventurer is one. And the way it works, actually let's move these boxes a little bit further back so we can get everything in shot. Is that better? Yeah, so you've got a pretty picture, the name of the particular person you're playing, the vulnerability, which is what you need to roll to damage this person, how far they move, how many life points they have, a token which you can flip to power your Ultimate Edition, your weapon, your ability, and then if you're playing against the Unchained Edition, your rivalry power. And then on the back you typically just have a pretty picture. So then you've got Gabriella, Tundra, he's another expansion character, Scarecrow, who's great fun, he's an expansion character, Dobbin, who I can't recall where he's from, The Bride, Maximilian, Zoe, who I'm not sure, Temper I think's in this base box, Hogarth, Cygnus, Ivy, and then you get to the Rift display. Now when you're beating up villains, you can get skulls in your Rift display. You've got 3 levels to your dungeon, Rift health based on how many players, and then 6 traps and 6 items, and that's another thing they didn't quite get right in the rule book. I thought it was 5 traps and 5 items. Apparently it's 6 of each, as per some errata that I think Sandy commented on Board Game Geek, or possibly one of his sons. This is an expansion, but the main actual monsters are orcs, crossbow orcs, kobolds and gnolls, and these are lesser minions. And if you don't have enough orcs, you get crossbow orcs. If you don't have enough crossbow orcs, you get kobolds. If you don't have enough kobolds, you get gnolls. And then on the greater minions, you've got the shaman, the troll and the ogre. And there's various rules to what to do. And depending on the level of your dungeon, for example, an orc rolls 1 white dice and is vulnerable to 1 sword. On the green level, it rolls 2 white dice and is vulnerable to 1 sword, but on blue level, it rolls 2 dice and is vulnerable to 2 swords. So to kill an orc is 1 sword on the first 2 levels. On the final level, it's 2 swords, and it upgrades its attack and so on and so forth. Now the various dice faces are sword, brain, speed, stun and wild, and there is also the ability to combine 2 symbols to get any particular icon you're after. There's then a rather handy little inset picture to tell you what's on the top thing, but nothing on the back. I leave that bit of cardboard in just to try and keep my figures semi-safe. So I'm not sure what you get relative retail to Kickstarter, but I believe everything in this tray is what you get in retail. So let's move that to one side. So you've got your let's start off with regular orcs actually. So you've got 2 sculpts for orcs. So you've got these rather nice sword waving orcs doing their kind of fist wave. Then you have the kind of 2-handed orc, and these are really nice. I like the orcs. They've got the slightly podgy short leg comic look, but it works quite well. Now the crossbow orcs I'm not quite so keen on, but they're not bad. They got this large crossbow and rather awkward shoulder joint, which is better on some orcs than others. You've then also got potentially a third variety of orc, which is a bit confusing when you first get the game, which is this club waving orc. So potentially 3 varieties of orcs. You've then got hyenas, which are these rather lovely characters here. Sorry, gnolls, not hyenas. So the hyena-headed guys are the gnolls. You've also got the hobgoblin shaman, who's an absolute pest. You want to kill him as quickly as possible. And I think that's pretty much it for the figures. You've then got your 2 heroes, whose names escape me, possibly Gabriella and Ivy, but I can't remember. Not so keen on the hero sculpts, particularly these little ladies. They, I don't know, they just don't quite work for me. Now, I believe a lot of the models are actually based on 3D originals from the video game. Then, if you've got the expansion, there are a couple of extra figures. So these are expansion figures. These are goblin sappers. They're a menace. You want to kill them on sight as well. They destroy your traps, which of course is a way that you kill off various orcs. You've then got some rather large based miniatures. Now this is Maximilian, I believe. And then we've got another character who is the wizard. Is that Cygnus or something? Anyway, I'm not sure why you've got ridiculously large bases, particularly this guy. He could have been on a base slightly bigger than that, in my opinion. So that's one of the criticisms, is that the big bases, they're quite nice, makes the miniature stable, but either all the heroes should be on big bases, and then all the villains should be on round bases, and they should be sized appropriately. So let's just pop those back in so I don't lose track of things. Then you've got various dice. So you've got white dice, green dice, yellow dice, red dice, purple dice, and blue dice. So blue is stun and wild. White is a bit of everything. Red is mostly swords, including double swords. Purple is mostly brains, including double brains. Green is healing and skulls. And yellow is mostly feet. And depending on which monster you're attacking will depend on which dice are more likely to hit them, because different monsters are vulnerable to different things. Now I've actually got 2 sets, care of Kickstarter, so I can give each side of the table their own set of dice, and they've got exactly the right number of dice, because there is a dice limit of, I think it's 3 green, and then 2 of most of the special colours, and then 10, I want to say, of the white. So there's all that. Now, you normally get skull tokens, but again, if you're on Kickstarter or I believe the web store, you can actually buy these skulls. These are the glow-in-the-dark versions. There is also a regular version. The only criticism I'd have of these is there are some tiny, tiny little skulls, these little teeny things. They're very easy to lose track of on a table, so not so good. But if you've not got the nice fancy 3D bits, you get flat tokens like this, so These are your markers for when you've used your power, and this is the current level of your dungeon. That's the rift life, if I remember correctly, and then for each of your hero you've got a life token. And again, I would criticise these tokens as they are just too big for the player board, so I'm thinking of replacing these with little red hearts or crystals or something. So there's that. Whilst we're talking about minis, you also get a big bag of minis, which includes some really nice figures. So you've got this giant troll, which is a really fantastic figure. Your tiny little kobolds, who are little pests but don't actually do you much damage. Now, I think this might be a Kickstarter extra orc. You've then got, I think it's ogres. Again, lovely figure. Somewhere I've got a Cyclops. Yes, here he is. Then you've got Cyclops. Now, he might be an expansion or a Kickstarter figure. I don't remember just offhand. And I've got a few more Goblin Sappers in here for some reason. But no, they're in the wrong thing. And was that it? I think that was it for the figures. So if you get the expansions, you might get some of these figures, but I've got a feeling these are a Kickstarter special extra. I might be wrong on that. They might have come as a Kickstarter upgrade to the retail box sets. Now, if you've got some expansions, you might get these boss cards, which are these large cards here, including the ability to play some of the heroes as villains. And basically what they will do, let's take Moneybags, who I believe is a Kickstarter special. He appears on the second level first wave. He's vulnerable to lightning bolts. He has 10 skulls for killing him. He moves 2. He does no damage except to the rift, which he destroys with 10 damage basically, and he takes 8, 6 or 4 damage to kill. And he's just got a pretty picture on the back, and that's pretty much the same for all of these various baddies, and you've got different baddies with different attacks and different stuff that they do. So there you go. So that's a way of spicing up your game. You can add these kind of boss monsters as well. Well, I've been talking a lot about, oh, you do this and waves and stuff, and you don't really know how to play the game. So let's just quickly grab some components. So the way the game's basically working is you're trying to defend this thing called the Rift. And your monsters, for example, they might spawn on the grassy knoll here. Then what happens is they tend to follow the direction arrow. So they're going to move to the caltrops, then from the caltrops they're going to move to the gas chamber, and from the gas chamber they'll move to the Rift, where they then blow up and destroy your Rift eventually. Now some tiles, like caltrops and gas chambers, have special rules. So for example, if we took the gas chamber, special, if a hero ends his turn here, take 1 damage. If a lesser minion ends their turn here, after the minions have moved, 1 such minion will die. So for example, if these 3 orcs move in, they're done. At the end of their movement, 1 of them dies from the poison gas. However, gas chambers you can pass through with no ill effect. It's just stopping on it that does you damage. And there are various other tiles that have various other effects. So for example, let's just talk about caltrops as I've got it out. If a hero moves through this tile without stopping, takes 1 damage. If any lesser minion moves through this tile without stopping, 1 such minion dies. However, if you start or end your turn on this tile, you're fine. And again, back has got a pretty picture, so you can randomize these tiles. You always want the Rift tile, and then you've got these various randomized tiles that you lay out for your dungeon. Now on the maps it might say, oh, you have the grassy knoll and the caltrops, randomize 3 other tiles, and there's various ways you can choose to do that. And each tile's, you know, reasonably pretty, they're functional, fairly decent quality, and that's basically the game. You're defending the Rift from just swarm after swarm of monsters that just keep coming, and as they level up they get harder to kill, they do more damage. You also, depending on the amount of players you might spawn lots of monsters. So let's have a look at how that part of the game works, which requires me to dig out the cards. Okay, now with the cards, For example, this is Scarecrow's weapons. So each hero will start off with a basic weapon. They can then upgrade it for 2 skulls to a slightly improved version, 4 skulls once you get to the green level, and then 6 skulls at the blue level. As you can see, it goes from 2 to 3 to 5 white dice. So it gets slowly better over time, making it much easier for your hero to kill people. But 4 heroes are going to struggle to kill various beasties. So as part of your abilities, you can actually create traps. Now traps have their own type of card. They come in various codes. So you've got the green level. Oh, hold on, this is gear, not traps. Where have my traps gone? Let me just get them. Well, now I've sorted out my pile of cards. So you've got gear and traps. So for example, this is a gear for the first level, whereas this is a trap for the second level. So it'll tell you at the bottom whether it's a gear or a trap, and then at the top you've got white, green and blue icons. Now sadly, when you flip it over, it doesn't necessarily tell you what level it is beyond this little tiny icon, which is not the best. Also, another criticism of these cards is you've got this tiny little red writing that says once you use this, you discard it, which is a bit annoying. But anyway, let's talk about gear first of all. So you've got your weapons for your heroes, but also each hero can equip either a trinket, a ring, or what's the other one? Trinket, ring, or amulet. So here you go. So amulet, ring, trinket. So you can have one of each. Now some characters have special abilities to break that rule. So for example, this amulet is a level 1 amulet. It's going to cost you 2 skulls, and it's when you attack, you replace one of your white dice with a red dice, which means you're more likely to roll swords. So what else have we got? Let's have a look. So we've got a ring here. 1, it's the pity party. If you're injured, enemies attacking you, roll half as many dice, rounding down. So that's pretty handy. And then here you go, an amulet, pointed stick, costs you nothing. You discard it when you use it, and it gives you 2 white dice when you attack. So these are making your heroes a little bit better at dealing with mobs, and also this one here heals you. However, if it was just 4 heroes, you'd really struggle. So as I was trying to say way back, you're going to need to set traps. Now, if you've ever played the computer game of Orcs Must Die, you'll understand why there's traps. So for example, this trap here costs you 2 skulls. It's going to automatically do a sword and a foot to anyone who enters the disco ball trap, and it's then discarded at the end of the turn. Then there's various other traps that do various other different symbols. This one is slightly different. You pay 1 for it. It's an arrow wall. It kills any one orc, then destroys itself. This one is a defibrillator. It costs 2. It's discarded after use. It's going to kill 1 lesser minion, so an orc, a crossbow orc, a gnoll, or a kobold. It will also heal all heroes on that tile for 1 life, and then it destroys itself, and so on and so forth. So that's your level 1 traps. Now, as the levels get tougher, you're going to need beefier traps. So for example, if we grab just a couple of these traps here. So this one, it's a healing fountain. It costs you 2. It's going to heal everyone, and it doesn't discard. This one is a blister. It doesn't discard. It kills 1 orc permanently. This one is something known as a support trap that you can put between tiles, and it makes you do various shenanigans. So you're thinking, these are really cool, let's just load up a tile with traps. Well, the problem is you can only fit 2 traps to each tile, and I need to double check the rulebook. It's either 1 or 2 support tiles, support traps between tiles. And having upgraded from green, you can then finally go for blue. And obviously, if you put 2 traps on a tile, you can replace an existing trap with a new trap. So that's what you're going to do to try and kill the invading hordes. You're going to upgrade your heroes' weapons, you're going to give them gear, you're going to set traps, and hopefully that's going to allow you to fend off the rampaging horde. So, how do you actually get your horde? Well, that's the final set of cards, and let me check, I think this is all army cards, yes. So, for example, here you go. you basically, a bit like Zombicide, you just have a deck of cards. I think it's something like 10 or 14, 20 and 20 or something like that. And that's each wave. Now, on the first wave, you pick depending on the amount of players. So for 2 players, 2 crossbow orcs, 3 players, 2 crossbow orcs with an ogre, 4 players, 3 kobolds, 3 crossbow orcs and an ogre. So obviously, the more players you have, the harder it gets. Now on the first wave, if you're 3 players and you draw an ogre, well, ogres don't spawn on a first wave, so it would be replaced by what's known as lesser minions, so orcs, crossbow orcs, etc. And there's basically just random cards in here that all give you different ones. Like this one, this is an expansion one, gives you a goblin sapper, or 2 goblin sappers, depending on whether it's 2, 3 or 4 players. So that's basically how the game works. You draw a card to spawn your waves, they move, tracks trigger, they then attack the heroes, then the heroes get their turn, they try and kill the horde, and so on and so forth, and you keep doing that. Now, in theory, it's a fun, quick game. I did play it yesterday, and unfortunately we had a monstrous game which seemed to last about 3-4 hours. So we were playing as 2 players but with 4 heroes, so we played a 4-player version of the game, and it went on for quite a while. It was a real battle. We almost lost a hero, a couple of guys almost got into the rift, but we did manage to efficiently run our dungeon to fend off the enemy. So it was great fun, and the time did sort of fly by, to be honest. So anyway, that is a very quick look at the order. Let's have a quick look at the Unchained and expansions. Right, so we've got the Unchained box here. It's very similar. You've got pretty much an identical rulebook. I don't think there's any difference. Again, the sequence of play, so your hero upgrade, your minion phase, where the baddies do all their stuff, then the hero phase, then the upkeep phase. And phase 1 and 4 are simultaneous. Phase 2, pretty much everyone can help out. It's only phase 3 where you're going to burn time as you consider, each player's moves. So you have your hero board. So obviously these are the baddie version. So we've got the Ancestor, who apparently gains health by killing people. So he's sort of a vampiric character, and that's quite good fun. I also have an expansion dropped into the box here. Similarly, you have your icon for where things are. So you've got your heroes and your villains. Obviously, the villains being the goodies from the order. You again have a map board. Then these are possibly expansion characters, or are these the base box? I can't remember. And then your various heroes. So instead of orcs, you've got soldiers, crossbowmen, satyrs, lion, dwarf shaman, a bear and a giant. And the bears are quite terrifying. The Rift display probably looks very familiar, except you've got different iconography on the Rift display board. So let's have a look at some of the plastic cracks. So we've got our little Catwoman hero, who's quite a nice little mini. I quite like her. Has got a sort of assassin vibe going on about her. Then you've got your basic soldiers. Now, I think we've got 3 sculpts of your basic soldiers. Again, they're quite tubby, human warriors. So hopefully that's showing up for you there. So waving his sword in the air, double-handed sword, so very similar poses to the orcs, so a little bit of sort of visual memory. And then a waving sword guy. Then your rather pathetic looking crossbow humans, who I like even less than the orcs version of the crossbows. Then where's he gone? Crossbow shaman. Dwarf shaman. So let's get that right. So dwarf shaman, nice little figure. So that's the kind of main villains as far as we're concerned attacking us. Then you've got some rather epic figures. So you've got your lion with his 2-handed glaive. Couple of sculpts of him. Again, I'm not sure whether the Kickstarter mixed things up. I do also have the non-glow-in-the-dark skulls in this box. Oh yes, then the bear, who's a very impressive, hefty figure. If we compare him to, have we got a nice smallish character? Not really. Anyway, that's sort of a, I guess it's sort of GW orc type sized character, so nice big burly character, and that's obviously a hero. Then we've got sort of your big nasty there. Ah, here you go, the giants. These are just brilliant. Really like the giants. Lovely, lovely figure. But the sad figure of the lot, in my opinion, is the satyr, who has rather enormous head, which I guess is in the video game, but I don't particularly like that as a figure. But you can definitely tell he's the guy who runs, so at least they've got that going for them. Who else we got? Now, this, I think, is an expansion character. He's a dwarf throwing hand grenades. I guess he's equivalent to the goblin sapper, if I remember correctly. Haven't really played this particular set yet. Then we've got this kind of gnome mechanic, who I believe, again, is an expansion character. So the heroes, we've got the little lady, this kind of demonic guy, Mr. overcompensating with his sword, and then the really cool orc character. And I think that's pretty much it for the figures. They're just chucked in a big well at the back there. I think the tiles, I have to sort those out in a sec. I think the tiles, yes, I haven't opened the tiles yet. You've got your first player marker, which is this rather glorious large lump of cardboard. Again, the various tokens, which are decent quality, and your dice. So for some reason my dice have gone everywhere, and the cards are all basically the same, except obviously you know, they're spawning gnome tinkerers, for example. So this is, I believe, the expansion cards, whereas all the other cards in the box are from the base set. So there you go. That is just a very quick look at the order box. Yes, I need to sort these out so I don't damage my figures. Right, I'm going to take care of that off camera, I think. Let's have a look at some of the expansions that you can get for this game. So you've already seen some of the expansion figures because I've integrated them into the base box. But there is the boss pack, and then the hero packs. So there's one for the Order and a separate one for Unchained. Well, I'm first of all going to start off with the disappointment to me. I was really excited by the boss pack at first. Getting new bosses to enhance your game seemed really cool, but when they turned up I was a little bit underwhelmed. So you've got these sort of, I think this is your big kind of rock elemental, and then I think he splits into these two slightly smaller ones, and then he splits into these four really tiny ones, if I remember correctly. So that was really disappointing, that particular boss. Slightly more impressive, but again looking very similar to the rock elemental, is the Fire Lord, who obviously has the horns and has a different fist raised. And then slightly more interesting, this sort of ogre character. I can't remember who he was. And then a rather nicer run-in satyr. I think that's what the actual satyr should look like, to be honest. So yeah, it's not a pack that I feel you need to have, but it's nice to have it. I'm just a little bit disappointed by the rock elemental. I mean, I would have hoped this guy would be much bigger, and you know, these tiny guys would be more like this middle size. This middle-sized guy would be a little bit bigger than this, and then obviously the big guy being really big and impressive. So very disappointing box to me, the boss pack. I've not actually played with it yet, so it might be the actual gameplay options are decent, but the minis are you know, a bit of a miss for me, apart from these two figures, the satyr and the kind of shamanic ogre orc guy. Anyway, let's move to the hero packs, which is much more successful. So we got the Unchained and also the Order. I think I'll start off with the Unchained. Well, in my box I've just got the figures because I've taken the hero boards out and put them actually with my base box. And you've got a mix of large and small bases. Now I like this guy. He's a really... try and get him in camera would help. He's a really, really nice figure. I like that nice pose. We've then got our sorceress character, who's very kind of Cruella de Vil sort of look. I like her. She's great. We've then got this gnoll with his like ripper claws, and he's a bit disappointed. If one of his arms was pointing in a different direction, a bit better. And we do have a slightly different version, which I believe is a different character, who also I'm not so keen on. So these two, a little bit disappointing sculpts to me, but, you know, decent figures, don't get me wrong. Oh, is this the Ancestor? He's fantastic, really like him. Great sculpt. We've then got this Kobold Taskmaster character, who's a fantastic sculpt. Really like him. Some nice detail, nice dynamic pose. We've then got this rather slight lady here. Again, nice figure, maybe a little bit too thin and spindly, which I guess is that sort of cartoon animated look from the computer game. And then this lovely Cyclops character with his skull staff. Really, really like him. So I would say that there's 3 big bases that I really like, and the 3 small bases I also very keen on. Unfortunately, the characters I was hoping to really like have the worst sculpts, which are these 2 Ripper Claw kind of gnoll characters. So a mixed bag. All the characters are great. Even the sculpts I don't like are pretty decent. It's just a shame that 2 of the sculpts I'm really not that keen on. And I think a slightly better pose would have done wonders for both particular miniatures. But that's a personal opinion. No problems for actually playing the game. Well, I'm going to start off with a figure I know quite well because we actually played with him yesterday. This is the Adventurer. He's a fantastic character. I like his sculpt as well, with this sort of snake-headed staff. Really, really cool character. Very enjoyable. We've then got a couple of expansion characters that I haven't played yet. This character's a little bit flat. Not so keen on her. She's obviously the good version of that evil character we just saw. Not so keen on her. Her play sheet looks quite good though. We've then got this sort of dwarf miner character. He's fun. I like the sculpt. I think he could be quite fun to play with as well. And I've got to remember how he went back in the box now. Dear, this is the only slight downside to having these plastic inserts, is remembering how things fit in the box. We've then got this rather cool character with her book with the little dragon coming out of it. Really like the sculpt. A little bit slight, but again, that's a stylistic choice. Then we've got the big bases. So the Minotaur, he's not bad. Again, why he's gone with these 2 wide open arms. I don't know why one can't be raised or something. I guess you could proxy in a miniature from, for example, Massive Darkness, but, you know, he's a good sculpt. Nothing desperately wrong with him. Just a slight tweak to his design, I think, would have been great. You've then got this guy waving his battle axe, a much more dynamic pose, much more to my liking. Again, slightly flat-looking legs, which is a shame, I guess, part of the design process. Then a really, really cool character, Scarecrow, with his crossbow and his pumpkin head. Unfortunately, although he's got a crossbow, as far as I'm aware, he doesn't actually have a ranged attack, and that's something I would criticise the game, that some of the characters don't seem to have ranged attack. They can only attack people in their own tile. And then Tundra, he's a fantastic character. He is a skull-generating monster. I played with him yesterday, and he was amazing. Almost, but not quite, the MVP. He enabled us to keep revitalising our characters, buying upgrades, because he gets the greater bonus of every time he earns a skull, so does the Rift. So he was an absolute beast. Really, really like him. So out of the hero sets, there's only 2 sculpts I'm not so keen on, and only one that I'm particularly not keen on. So to my mind, the hero box for the Order does a slightly better job than for the Unchained. Now in this box I also keep a couple of Kickstarter extras. So there is a boss called Moneybags, and as you can see, he's very, very gold. He's the guy who does 10 damage to a Rift, and when you kill him generates 10 skulls, so you can purchase upgrades. So he's a really cool character. And then a ridiculous substitute for your first player marker. So the first player marker realised in 3D. I'd like to see a monster card for this guy. I don't think they brought one out. So he can actually become a boss rather than just a first player marker. Particularly epic. Got a nice heft to it. And a nice inclusion, but, you know, not desperately necessary. Well, there you go. That was a very quick whistle-stop tour of Orcs Must Die, the board game from Petersen Games. I haven't really done a playthrough here, and I'm not planning to. It's been out quite a while now, this game, so there are possibly other videos. I might at some stage revisit and do a how-to-play video, but it's a pretty simple game. The rulebook is pretty decently laid out. The cards are pretty simple to understand. The criticisms I would have of the game is I think they could do with issuing a rulebook that's a bit easier to use whilst you're actually playing it, because trying to find things is a little bit of an issue. There are a couple of erratas, so I think on Board Game Geek there is an errata and FAQ document you can download. They are fairly minor, to be honest, so it's not really game breaking. Some of the miniatures could be better, so probably just out of shot. Let me just gently slide this across. So this blue lady here and these two kind of Knoll characters, they're my least favourite heroes. But yeah, the overall quality of the miniatures is pretty good. They're robust, they're durable, they're easy to move around. You've got plenty of figures. On some of the more manic sections of the game, you might run low on figures, might have to trigger some of the optional, if you can't spawn a figure, this is what you do. So yeah, on the whole, pretty good. The biggest criticism I'm going to lay at this game is those little cards with the red iconography, which is almost impossible to read. They could do with issuing new card designs. I am tempted to scan in all the discard cards and tweak them in Photoshop or something just to make them easier to see across the table. But I think you get plenty of stuff. I'm looking forward to playing the Unchained edition and then doing a Order versus Unchained. That's one thing I haven't tested out, the kind of team versus team play. Looks really interesting and will give you even more gameplay in your box. So do I recommend it? Yes, if you like tower defense sort of games where you get wave after wave of enemies. If you like simple beer and pretzel games like Zombicide and stuff like that, you'd probably enjoy it. If you're looking for a really deep strategic tactical game, well, there are bits in here you're going to enjoy, but maybe it's not quite the game for you. If you don't like the look of the fantasy cartoon characters, again, you might find you dislike the game purely from an aesthetics point of view. But overall, I think it's a pretty decent game. Out of all the tower defense games I've played, it is probably my favourite. I would say Zombicide and Massive Darkness definitely are slightly better games than this. But I don't think you'll regret spending your money on this if you like that sort of game. I will warn you, with more players, the run time can go a bit long because you've got the decisions over what traps to buy, where to put them. You've got decisions about what gear to buy for your heroes. You've got decisions about where to move. You've got decisions about who's going to attack who. And then you've got the actual mechanics of moving around and all that. And that could make the game run long. Now, when I played it as a 2-player game, I don't remember it running that long. But when we played it as a 4-player yesterday, it took us a good 4 hours, I think, in total to play. 5 hours if you included the setup and the strip down as well. So yes, it is a game that can run long with higher player counts, but the more you play it, the quicker it's going to go, and you might be able to just say, oh, I know what that card is, I want it, I don't want it. So there you go. That, as I said, was a quick look at Orcs Must Die. I hope you've enjoyed that. Apologies for not doing a demonstration playthrough. As I say, I might save that for a later day if I ever revisit this game based on a play of Unchained versus the Order. Hopefully most of the stuff I've shown you is available if you get all the expansions, and hopefully I did manage to catch all the bits that are actually optional extras. So for example, the skull tokens, money bags, the first player miniature, etc. They're all definitely things that you needed either to get in an expansion or an optional extra, or possibly even Kickstarter exclusives. So there you go. That concludes my talk about Orcs Must Die. So till the next video, happy gaming.